Okay, the guy you see next to me is the most generous billionaire in the world, and I found him.
Hi, my name is Andrew, and this is my story.
I'm Mr. Beat. I really am. I know sometimes people don't believe that I am, but I really am. Anyway, behind me is a beautiful building in my hometown of Lawrence, Kansas. If you want to have a private event in this here building, it will cost you between $700 and $1,400 a day, depending on the day, as you might have guessed. There's a lot of wedding receptions here. But this building used to be Lawrence's public library, a place where a young Langston Hughes likely visited and became inspired to become an author. In 1903, Lawrence residents asked a billionaire for money to build it. That billionaire was like, sure, and ultimately donated $27,500 to its construction, or around $953,000 in today's money. From its opening in 1904 until 1972, this building was known as the Carnegie Library. Today it's just simply known as the Carnegie Building. That's because the billionaire who donated money for this building to be built was Andrew Carnegie. Or Carnegie. It's pronounced differently depending on where you're from. I know, it's really confusing, and in this video, I'm going to pronounce it both ways, okay? I'm sorry. But it was just one of approximately 2,811 libraries around the world funded by Carnegie. During the last 18 years of his life, Carnegie would give away nearly $7 billion in today's money to not just libraries, but to universities, foundations, and other organizations specializing in increasing opportunities for ordinary people. Here's the story of the billionaire who gave away 90% of his money. You know what? I think we should actually go to Pittsburgh. Yeah. It's not that far away from Lawrence, right? Yeah. Maybe I can talk Mrs. Beat into it. Andrew Carnegie was born in Dunfermline, Scotland on November 25th, 1835. His parents, William and Margaret, lived in a tiny cottage they shared with another family. William was a weaver, but rarely made much money from it. Andrew had two younger siblings. His sister sadly died as an infant. When Andrew was 7, his brother Thomas was born. Because of this philanthropist dude named Adam Rowland, Andrew was able to go to school for free. In fact, his school was called the Free School of Dunfermline. Back then, it wasn't that common for kids to get the opportunity to go to school for free, okay? Andrew's uncle, George Lauder, was a huge influence on him. Andrew often hung out with his son, George Lauder Jr., aka Andrew's cousin. By 1845, the Carnegies were barely getting by. You see, William was a hand loom weaver, and around that time, a new textile mill opened in Dunfermline that could create way more cloth in a shorter amount of time using steam-powered looms. The textile mill could sell cloth for much cheaper than William could, and he soon realized his job was obsolete. Or jobsolete, you could say, which also just so happens to be a great podcast. Anyway, the family was desperate, but hope and opportunity seemed to await across the Atlantic Ocean. You see, Andrew's aunts, Margaret's sisters, had previously settled in the United States and had found lots of opportunity there. They urged Margaret to bring her family too, and so she did. In May 1848, with the help of a loan from George Lauder, the Carnegies set sail for the United States to find work there. Andrew, now now 12 years old, hated to leave his home country. It was only the second time he had ever left his hometown. And yet, when Andrew arrived at New York Harbor, his homesickness went away pretty quickly. What an exciting place America was compared to Scotland. Andrew and his family took a series of canals and rivers to reach their final destination, Allegheny, Pennsylvania, to move in with Andrew's aunts. Back then, Allegheny was a working-class town made up of wooden houses sitting in the mud next to the river. Today, Allegheny is part of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that's where Andrew's rags to riches story goes down, baby. Andrew had decided to pursue work instead of going to school in order to help his family. He and his dad both got job offers around the same time at the same Scottish-owned cotton mill. Andrew's first job ever was changing spools of thread 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, earning $1.20 a week, or around $47 a week in today's money. He be a bobbin' boy. Well, his dad apparently hated working at that cotton mill and quit, returning to weaving. But Andrew stayed, and apparently his amazing work ethic got the attention of a dude named John Hay, a dude from, you guessed it, Scotland, who produced bobbins. Hay offered Andrew a job working in his factory in quite horrible conditions, but hey, now he was making $2 a week, or around $79 a week in today's money. By the time Andrew was 14, his uncle George had hooked him up with a job at the Pittsburgh office of the Ohio Telegraph Company. There, Andrew worked as a telegraph messenger boy, earning $2.50 a week, or around $99 a week in today's money. I'm in Pittsburgh right now, by the way, in case you hadn't figured it out by now. And yes, I talked Mrs. Beat into it somehow. Mrs. Beat and I are here to check out the legacy that Carnegie left
In this city.
As a telegraph messenger boy, Andrew continued to work his butt off, and within a year was promoted to be a telegraph operator. Andrew didn't go to school, but that doesn't mean he wasn't educated. He was self-educated, as a matter of fact. Around the time he worked at the telegraph company, Andrew met James Anderson, a rich iron manufacturer who opened up his own personal library to the working boys of Pittsburgh every Saturday night. Indeed, every Saturday night, Andrew was in that library, either reading books or leading book discussions. Andrew valued his time at Anderson's library so much that he vowed to pay it forward one day himself by building libraries for, quote, poor boys in the future. He also worked well with others. You see, it's often about who you know, and Andrew made lots of connections. Working for the telegraph company, he went out of his way to get to know Pittsburgh's most powerful men. In 1853, when Carnegie was about 18 years old, a dude named Thomas Scott, no, not Travis Scott, Thomas Scott. Goodness gracious. Anyway, Thomas Scott hired him as a telegraph operator for the Pennsylvania Railroad. Again, after the recommendation by his uncle George, his starting salary was $4 a week, or around $161 a week in today's money. There, Carnegie quickly moved up the ranks, and by the time he was 24, Scott promoted him to be superintendent of the Western Division. That got him a yearly salary of $1,500, or around $56,000 yearly in today's money. It wasn't just hard work, though. Carnegie lucked out with some key investments. Arguably, the best way to make money is through passive income, or money that continues to flow in without having to actually work. And Andrew Carnegie's passive income began to trickle in with the help of Thomas Scott and another Pennsylvania railroad dude named J. Edgar Thompson. No, that's J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Thompson, there you go. With Scott and Thompson's help, as well as money borrowed from Carnegie's mom after she mortgaged her house, he bought $500 worth of shares in the Adams Express Company. Oh, Carnegie's dad had passed away by that point. Later, Carnegie bought shares of Theodore Woodruff's sleeping car company. Well, these investments paid off, and Carnegie didn't spend much of the money he was earning from them. He reinvested them. During the American Second Civil War, the telegraph and railroad both proved to help the Union victory, and Carnegie was heavily invested in both. However, during that war, he also became an early investor in the Columbia Oil Company. The majority of his fortune, though, of course, came from the steel industry. During the Civil War, Carnegie had met several steelmakers back in Scotland. These meetings convinced him that steel production would be the absolute best way for him to make money. Shortly after the Civil War ended, Carnegie left the Pennsylvania Railroad to create the Keystone Bridge Company, a company that would build, you guessed it, bridges. Carnegie hired his brother Thomas to be treasurer for the company. Around the same time, Carnegie also developed several ironworks, or places where iron is messed with so much that it creates really strong metals like, yes, steel. Steel, baby. I should add that even though he left the Pennsylvania Railroad, he still kept close ties with both Thomas Scott and J. Edgar Thompson. By 1868, Carnegie, now 33 years old, was making serious money, but also seriously working himself to death. He had begun to question why he was such a workaholic. Quote, "The amassing of wealth is one of the worst species of idolatry," he wrote. "No idol is more debasing than the worship of money." He also vowed to retire within a couple years and begin giving his money away. Well, he wouldn't give his money away yet. He still had to earn much more first, apparently. In 1873, Carnegie's cousin and best friend growing up, George Lauder Jr., decided to move to the United States to help Andrew make stronger and cheaper steel. Lauder, after all, was a mechanical engineer. Lauder and Carnegie had never stopped staying in touch all those years, and Andrew must have been excited when George joined him in Pittsburgh to help him with his steel business. Over the next 2 decades, Carnegie would make a fortune by controlling the biggest network of steel businesses ever owned by a single person. 3 things dramatically helped Carnegie become one of the wealthiest dudes in the world. First, using the Bessemer process to produce way more steel. Second, using something called vertical integration. Vertical integration simply just means one company owns the entire supply chain. In Carnegie's case, he bought up all the suppliers of raw materials. And third, accounting, baby. Carnegie heavily relied on data to run much more efficient operations. By the 1880s, he was not only one of the richest men in the world, he was quickly becoming one of the most famous. Still, he didn't have much of a personal life. By that time, he was already starting to donate his money and kind of retired. He moved from Pittsburgh to New York City, often staying at the Windsor Hotel with his mother, who was now in poor health. It was there that he met Louis Whitfield, the daughter of a textile merchant. The two loved to ride horses in Central Park, and they fell in love, although Carnegie kept it a secret from his mom. It was only after his mother died when he got married. He was 51 years old when he got married, and she was 30. Carnegie married Louise at her family's home in New York City on April 22nd, 1887. The two would have just one child together, Margaret. Louise would later play a huge role influencing where Carnegie donated his money. 5 years later, Carnegie consolidated all of his companies into one, simply called the Carnegie Steel Company. Despite Carnegie having mostly a good reputation today, he was a controversial dude when he was alive. First of all, Carnegie was one of the wealthy members of the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, which owned a dam that done messed up on May 31st, 1889. The bursting of that dam, as a matter of fact, caused a major disaster that killed more than 2,000 people. Today, that disaster is known as the Johnstown Flood, and many blamed it on that club that Carnegie was a member of. Carnegie did feel terrible about it and built the city of Johnstown a new library. However, the biggest controversy of Carnegie's career sprung out of the Homestead Strike, a violent worker protest that grew out of a dispute between the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers and the Carnegie Steel Company. Carnegie was in Scotland during most of it, letting his partner, Henry Clay Frick, Frick handle the unrest? Well, Frick was pretty anti-union. Frickin' Frick. He had reacted to worker complaints by lowering wages, for crying out loud. When the workers stopped showing up to work, Frick brought in thousands of other non-union workers from out of town and a private security force to protect them. On July 6, 1892, a major fight broke out between some of his private security forces and the striking workers that ended up causing 10 men to be killed and hundreds more injured. Even though Carnegie was away for most of the whole tragedy, he got much of the blame for it, mostly because he defended frickin' Frick. Besides, most now say his workers should have been paid much more to begin with, and Carnegie may have given lip service to unions, but he constantly did whatever he could to prevent unions from forming at his mills. Despite being a controversial figure, Carnegie wasn't shy about sharing his political opinions with the public, and he wasn't your typical, quote, robber baron, or what critics often called you if you were wealthy and powerful at the time. After all, he often had progressive views. Carnegie was an outspoken anti-imperialist. He talked trash about what he perceived was American colonialism in the aftermath of the Spanish-American War. In fact, he personally offered $20 million, or $726 million in today's money, to the Filipino people so that they could buy their independence from the United States. He was also a pacifist. Yep, if there was a war going on, Carnegie didn't want the United States to have anything to do with it. This was a big reason why President Theodore Roosevelt didn't like Carnegie, by the way. By 1901, Carnegie was tired of making money and ready to focus on giving it all away. On March 2nd, he sold Carnegie Steel Company to J.P. Morgan, another extremely wealthy dude, and arguably the country's most important banker at the time. This secret buyout was the largest industrial takeover in American history up to that point. Carnegie sold his company for $480 million, or $17.5 billion in today's money. This made him the second richest American of all time, only behind John Rockefeller. Carnegie was 65 when he sold his company, but he wasn't retired. In fact, he'd argue that this was when the real work began. You see, Andrew Carnegie wanted to give away all of his money. And he would have, if he didn't run out of time, as we all do. In 1900, Carnegie donated money to start the Carnegie Technical Schools, a vocational training school meant for the kids of the working class families of Pittsburgh. In 1912, it changed its name to Carnegie Institute of Technology and started offering 4-year degrees. In 1967, it merged with the Mellon Institute of Industrial Research to form Carnegie Mellon University, which is where I'm at right now. Don't you know? And some people are looking at me like, why is this guy here? Carnegie also gave $2 million to start the Carnegie Institution in Washington, D.C., an organization meant to conduct scientific research. He started a bunch of other organizations, actually. There you go. Check out that list and stuff. All of them have the goals of promoting the general welfare and happiness of ordinary people. In addition to scientific research, the organizations focus on stuff like art, international affairs, and education. Today, more than 26 organizations around the world are named after him. However, Carnegie's biggest legacy is probably his contributions to libraries. Carnegie built this library in his hometown of Pittsburgh. Heck, he built the entire library system in Pittsburgh. 8 libraries in total were built because of Carnegie. 6 of the original ones that he built are still in operation. As I said at the beginning of this video, Carnegie ultimately was responsible for building at least 2,811 libraries around the world. By the time of his death, around half of all libraries in the United States were there because of him. He firmly believed that education should be free, and libraries were a darn good way to make that happen. Carnegie was also a firm believer in the power of museums. He believed they inspired people to improve not only their own lives, but the lives of their communities. Carnegie built this museum, which you see behind me. We are here at the Natural History Museum and the Art Museum, which are connected. There are a total of 4 museums that he's responsible for building here in Pittsburgh. Yeah, we checked them out all right. The Museum of Art is perhaps the first museum of modern art to ever exist in the country. The coolest part of the museum, in my opinion, is the fact that Carnegie realized that most people couldn't afford to travel around the world to see the coolest places. So he brought replicas to Pittsburgh, like the Hall of Sculpture, a replica of the interior of the Parthenon. The Hall of Architecture has around 140 full-size plaster casts of parts of buildings found in the ancient civilizations of Egypt, Greece, Rome, and medieval Europe. Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh also runs the Kamen Science Center and Andy Warhol Museum, which, in case you didn't know, Andy Warhol is also from Pittsburgh. And Carnegie didn't forget to give back to his home country. He gave $10 million to create the Carnegie Trust for the Universities of Scotland. $10 million was a wildly unprecedented amount at the time to do something like this, okay? He gave another $10 million to the Carnegie United Kingdom Trust. He donated a ton of stuff to his hometown of Dunfermline in particular. He was a big patron of music, most famously building Carnegie Hall in New York City, which is now one of the most legendary music venues in the world. He worked with Booker T. Washington to start the National Negro Business League and donated lots of money to the Tuskegee Institute, an African-American college in the Deep South. And finally, Carnegie established pension funds for his former employees so that they could retire comfortably. Remember, this was before Social Security existed. By 1911, Carnegie realized that he wasn't going to be able to give away all his fortune by the time he died. So he established the Carnegie Corporation of New York to continue on with the goal of promoting the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding. Carnegie spent his last days at his Shadowbrook estate in Lenox, Massachusetts. He died on August 11th, 1919 from pneumonia. He was 84 years old. And yep, after his death, the remaining $30 million or $535 million in today's money, continue to go to the public, specifically to various foundations, charities, and worker pensions. He left a small inheritance to his wife and daughter, a few assets, enough to keep them comfortable. But there's a reason why the descendants of Andrew Carnegie aren't wealthy and powerful today. In fact, I could barely find any information about them at all. Carnegie didn't keep it in the family like so many rich and powerful people do. In fact, Margaret eventually had to sell her townhome because it got too expensive to maintain it. Her legacy today is mostly carrying on the work that her father started, continuing to make sure her dad's fortune went to the public to help so-called ordinary folks. An estimated $15.6 billion. That's how much money total Andrew Carnegie gave away, adjusted for inflation and today's money. But remember, that money was an investment. It's actually worth a lot more considering how that money likely had a positive ripple effect. Heck, Carnegie created many ripples. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, one of those ripples was in my hometown. Today, likely due to the fact that he gave away most of his wealth, Andrew Carnegie is often viewed much more favorably than all the other wealthy and powerful men of the Gilded Age. In my opinion, we are currently living in the second Gilded Age here in the United States, and that's why I think it's a particularly relevant time to learn about Carnegie's story. According to the French economist Gabriel Zuckman, just 18 families hold 1.4% of the country's total wealth. The richest 0.01% hold 10% of the country's wealth. Compare this to the Gilded Age, when the richest 0.01% held 9% of the country's wealth. In other words, wealth inequality is more extreme now than it was during the Gilded Age. It is yet to be seen if there is an Andrew Carnegie in today's Gilded Age. The closest examples we have are the two billionaires, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. Both have promised to give away nearly all their wealth before they die. Heck, they even convinced other billionaires to give away their money. In 2010, they began the Giving Pledge, gathering a group of wealthy folks who have all promised to give away more than half of their wealth before they die. So far, everyone combined in the group is worth more than $1 trillion. Dangness. But before the Giving Pledge, there was Andrew Carnegie. And his story is a uniquely American story. His story is an inspiring story. He proved that not just people born into privilege could become extremely wealthy. I mean, he worked his butt off just to get out of poverty, which makes it even more impressive that he ended up becoming the second richest American in history. Most importantly, after he made his fortune, he gave it all back. The same simply cannot be said about the vast majority of wealthy and powerful people in human history. Unfortunately, he never forgot his roots. He realized that despite growing up in poverty, a few key people, usually rich people, helped him out along the way. His parents, of course, his Uncle George, Adam Rowland, James Anderson, Thomas Scott. Sure, he was ruthless at times. Many argue that he exploited and dehumanized his workers. Throughout his working career, he seemingly prioritized the bottom line over all else. It was all about making as much money as possible. He believed individualism ultimately improved society more than collectivism. In other words, he thought that the personal pursuit of wealth made everyone better off. But Andrew Carnegie would argue that the ends justify the means. His famous article, The Gospel of Wealth, makes this clear. His autobiography, which he wrote shortly before his death, also makes this clear. In both, he argued that the rich were obligated to use their wealth to give back to society. Heck, he even argued that if the rich weren't going to give back willingly to society, then governments should tax them so that they are forced to give back. Carnegie firmly believed that the future leaders of society would and should come from the working class. In fact, and this is kind of crazy because I didn't realize it until researching it for this video, but based on all of the data that we have, it's safe to say that Andrew Carnegie was the greatest philanthropist to ever live. No joke. Simply put, to Andrew Carnegie, there was no point whatsoever to accumulating wealth if all you do with it is keep it for yourself or your family. To him, true satisfaction only came by giving it all away. Hey, speaking of benefactors, this video is brought to you by my benefactors on Patreon. So thank you to my benefactors on Patreon for supporting the channel and making it possible for me to visit locations to film, like here in Pittsburgh. Starting with my biggest donors going alphabetically, thank you to Alicia Solberg, Alvino V, Andrew B, Anthony Beckett, Austin Ciros, Corey Ryman, Derek Williams, Dr. Paul J. Lilly, Empty Machine, Fletch Vick, History Nerd, Isabel, Isaiah Warfield, Jeremy Dunham, Jesus Carrillo, Joe Cook, Michael Cortez, Neo R14, Nicholas Dronsky, Nick Everett, Quote Defender of Communism, Pat Iapicca, Patrick Stewart, Weird, Psycho, Robert Candell, Sean Connett, Trevor Jones, Adam Christians, Aditya Anand, Andrew Snyder, Chums McGuffey, Elias Pierce, Emily Glover Wilson, Eric Hernandez, Jack L., Jacob Ginsberg, Jacob Birnbaum, Jennifer, Joel Serrano Lozada, Jules Gringus, Justin Love, Michael Burt, Michael Shillo, Naderade, Oliver E., Raquel Jones, Salty, Stacy, Steve Bryan, Steve Eisen, TC, Taylor Almond, Thomas Oppenheim, Ty Marwitz, and Zachary F. Parker. And thank you for watching.